Detroit in mid-December wasn't as cold as the eyes of those who thought they knew who you were, just from a single glance. A rented black Lincoln glided to the curb like a nameless shadow, and the woman who stepped out of the back seat was no different, no designer tags, no markers of wealth, no signs that screamed for attention. She didn't need anyone to guess. They would know soon enough. Danielle Hayes tugged her cap lower, nudged the sunglasses on the bridge of her nose, and walked through the revolving doors of the Hayes and Wren showroom like a ghost returning to her own house, only to find it no longer recognized her. Palm Avenue, one of the flagship showrooms, didn't just sell cars. It sold illusion. The curves of the Eris Z12 weren't just feats of engineering, they were statements of belonging. Of who deserved to be near luxury, and who didn't. Inside, everything reeked of curated politeness. Italian leather couches in the lounge, ebony hardwood floors polished to the point you could see your own anxious reflection, and the subtle disdain, in them. Danielle didn't come to shop. She came to see the rot. She sat in the corner, invisible by design. No one knew who she was. The natural curls tucked under a basic baseball cap. No makeup. No signature red lipstick. Even her posture had changed, less composed, more uncertain. To anyone watching, she was just another customer hoping to be acknowledged. And she wasn't. Instead, she watched. A white couple entered. No appointment. No problem. Smiles. Champagne. Brochures. Then came a Latino woman, elegant, confident. She waited. No one came. When she asked about the Z12, she was gently redirected toward the base models. Then, a tall black man walked in. Dressed sharply. Designer watch. Confident stride. And yet, his welcome was lukewarm, borderline dismissive. No seat offered. No last name asked. He was gently guided to the performance line. More accessible, the salesman said. Accessible. The word hit Danielle's chest like a hammer. This wasn't a one-off mistake. This was design. A filter. A refined sorting system. Not based on income, but color. Across the room stood Martin Graves, showroom manager. Salt and pepper hair, precision smile. Danielle had hired him 3 years ago. Back then, he was charming. Reliable. A man who could hold the line. She saw now what line he'd been holding. Their eyes met. He didn't recognize her. But he knew, instinctively, that she was watching. And he offered her the same tight-lipped smile he gave the other, non-priority clients. Danielle didn't smile back. Then it happened. A black woman entered, holding the hand of a small boy with stars in his eyes. The child pointed toward the Z12 with wonder. His mother smiled. Behind the reception desk, a young employee, Erin, watched. Her hand twitched toward her tablet. Then Martin appeared behind her. A whisper. A look. A silent command. Erin pulled her hand back. The mother and son waited. And waited. No one came. Eventually, they turned around and left. The boy glanced back once. Danielle's throat tightened. That was the moment. Not the champagne. Not the brochures. But that boy's face. Danielle stood. Not with anger. But with certainty. She walked up to the front desk. Erin looked up, startled. "I was hoping you could help me," Danielle said, voice calm and clear. Erin blinked. "Which model were you interested in?" "The Z12, Danielle said, still looking her in the eye. "It's still right there, isn't it?" Erin's breath caught. Her eyes flicked toward Martin. "That one's reserved," she said softly. But it lacked conviction. "No, it's not," Danielle replied. "And you know that." Martin's voice sliced through the air. Smooth. Polished. Cold. Is there a problem here? Both women turned. Danielle didn't flinch. I was just explaining that the Z12 is open for viewing, she said. Martin smiled, controlled, dangerous. As I mentioned earlier, this line is curated. For those with a deeper brand alignment. Danielle almost laughed. She didn't. Instead, she pulled a simple white card from her bag. No logo. Just a number. She slid it toward Erin. If you ever want to talk, she said, call me. Then she turned and walked out. Outside, the city lights buzzed. Inside, the silence she left behind roared louder than any confrontation. Erin stared at the card. Her fingers trembled. And something inside her shifted. That night, Erin sat in her parked car beneath a flickering streetlight. The card in her hand felt heavier than it looked. Her thumb hovered over her phone. Then, without letting herself think, she dialed the number. 1 ring. 2. This is Danielle. Erin exhaled. It's me. From the showroom. Empires don't fall from loud explosions. They crack, quietly, at the seams. 3 days after the exposé went live, Project Ignition's story had been shared over 700,000 times. On Reddit, a post titled, "I was denied a test drive at Hayes and Wren for wearing a hoodie," reached 50,000 upvotes in 12 hours. It wasn't about one showroom anymore. It was a symbol, for every moment someone was told, you don't belong here. The headquarters of Caldwell Motors in Manhattan called for an emergency meeting. The boardroom, once filled with bold pitches and glossy presentations, had become a chamber of whispers. Danielle Hayes walked into that boardroom, not to present, but to witness. They weren't asking what went wrong. They were asking who let it surface. Danielle placed a proposal on the table, crafted by Erin and her new team. It was a detailed plan to rebuild the company's customer experience from the ground up. Dismantle covert tiered access systems. Mandate anti-bias training across all departments. Establish an independent customer equity council. Ban internal documents that ranked customers by zip codes or visible appearance. I'm not here to be applauded, Danielle said. I'm here to ask, do we still remember why we built this company? Silence. All eyes turned to one man, Leonard Drexler, the chairman of the board. The same man who once toasted Danielle's IPO. The same man who now measured her like a liability. We'll review, he said. 3 words. As cold as a closed door. Danielle walked out knowing what it meant. They're regrouping. They're plotting the counterattack. And I may be standing alone. That afternoon, across the country, the showroom in Chicago went mysteriously offline. System outage, they claimed. But the security cameras were conveniently wiped. And the only black employee was quietly asked to sign a resignation form. No cause listed. Back in New York, Erin, now officially Director of Customer Equity, was summoned for a compliance review. You've been flagged for potentially disclosing internal material, the head of legal said with corporate calm. I haven't leaked anything, Erin replied, voice steady. We'll be conducting a full investigation. You're on paid leave until then. No access to internal systems. No communication with teams. Just silence. As Erin left the building, her phone buzzed. Danielle's message. They're testing you. But you're not the receptionist anymore. That night, Erin received a video file anonymously. It was a clip. Internal meeting. 3 years ago. Marcus Graves, speaking to senior staff. We don't waste showroom hours on browsers. If they don't look the part, they don't get priority. Period. Erin stared at the screen. Then attached the video to the reform proposal. And hit send. To the board. To a journalist Danielle trusted. To an investor who once whispered to her at a holiday party, "If you ever see something wrong, don't let it slide." She didn't. The next morning, the headline dropped at 6:02 a.m. Inside a luxury showroom, leaked audio reveals systemic profiling at Hayes and Wren. By Kira Monroe, The Sentinel. The media storm hit like a lightning strike. Hashtags erupted. Testimonials flooded in. Employees past and present spoke up. And a live national news segment invited a special guest. Danielle Hayes. She didn't hide behind press releases. She stood in front of a camera and said, "I didn't build this company to be a velvet rope for the privileged. I built it so anyone who could afford excellence would be welcomed. What we've seen is not a fluke. It's rot. And rot doesn't stay buried. It spreads. Unless someone cuts it out." Inside the boardroom, Marcus Graves tried to salvage what was left of his throne. "I made that showroom profitable. I filtered who was serious. That's not bias, it's business." The board stared at him. Not convinced. Just exhausted. Danielle stayed silent. When the vote came. 11-4. Marcus Graves, terminated immediately. He stood. Straightened his tie. Gave Danielle one last glare. "You'll regret this." Danielle didn't flinch. "Only if we stop here." The door closed behind him. And the first brick of a corrupted wall fell. The greatest battles don't begin with a bang. They begin in silence, then tremble beneath the surface. 3 weeks after the boardroom vote, Danielle Hayes should have been hailed as the woman who changed a luxury brand's soul. Instead, the media started asking. Did she go too far? Was this justice, or a power play? Is equity killing elegance? The world rarely lets women of color win twice. On March 18, a headline on the cover of Business Line. Danielle Hayes, visionary or brand arsonist? The article posed questions, not accusations. But every sentence dripped with coded dismissal. Releasing internal footage, was it ethical? Has the reform created an atmosphere of fear? Is Hayes and Wren alienating its most loyal clientele? Alongside it, a grayscale photo of Danielle, unsmiling under harsh light. Caption, the woman who divided a brand. Erin read the piece. Her hands shook. They're turning you into the villain, she muttered. Danielle sipped her tea. Calm. Wiser than rage. They're scared, she said. When a black woman rises, they don't say, she's wrong. They say, she's dangerous. Behind the scenes, the old guard regrouped. Internal audits targeted the reformed showrooms. 2 employees who had supported Erin were abruptly relocated to remote branches. Erin's access to internal dashboards. Suspended, data maintenance, they claimed. Power never concedes. It retreats, regroups, and retaliates. Worse, an influencer blog titled, "Is Inclusion Killing Luxury?" It spread like wildfire. In forums, in investor circles, in customer WhatsApp groups. People weren't debating bias. They were debating whether equality was on brand. Erin called a strategy meeting. She entered the room with a fire burning in her eyes, and a file labeled Greenford. This town is organizing a petition against our equity protocols. They want us out. Then let's pull back, one executive said. Let the fire cool down. Erin looked him dead in the eyes. We don't carry torches to walk backwards. Erin flew to Greenford. Against every PR consultant's advice, she scheduled a town hall. You'll be ambushed, they warned. They'll record you. Edit your words. Erin smiled. Then let me tell my story before they write it for me. Greenford's hall was packed. One side, property developers, luxury car clients, local media. The other, Erin. No script. One mic. She stood under fluorescent lights and asked. Why does fairness frighten you? If treating people equally makes you uncomfortable, then the mirror is the problem, not the movement. No applause. Just silence. But the video went viral. A woman, a mic, and the truth. Hashtag Erin Torres trended for 3 days. Danielle texted her. You held the line. And the light. Weeks later, Viridian Media offered Project Ignition a $45 million sponsorship. With one caveat. All public messaging must be reviewed by our editorial board to ensure balanced tone and cultural neutrality. Erin read it. Smiled. Closed the email. She met with Omar, the CFO of Project Ignition. That funding could change everything, he said. We could grow overnight. And if the price is silence, she asked. It's not silence, he said. It's being strategic. Erin shook her head. Strategic is the necktie of betrayal. That night, Erin wrote a one-line reply. Project Ignition is not for sale. At the annual Future of Equity in Business Summit, Erin stood on stage, not as a celebrity, but as a constant. She said. The value of a movement isn't how fast it spreads. But whether it still holds truth when the winds blow hardest. And from the back row, someone watched quietly, Jared Whittaker. Once an enemy. Now, no longer certain. After her speech, he approached Erin. You made me think, he said. Erin answered, don't think back. Just don't walk backward. This was no longer a story of rebellion. This was a story of what happens after the fire dies down, of who dares to keep the embers alive. 1 month after Leonard Drexler's resignation, the media cooled down. But inside Hayes and Wren, no one exhaled. Erin Torres now held the title of Director of Equity Operations. But a title doesn't equal power. Power is not the chair, it's whether they let you stay in it when the floor shakes. 3 showrooms outright refused to implement the reforms. One in Dallas ignored equity training, citing unique expectations from our elite clientele. Another moved all equity guidelines into a folder labeled, Do Not Apply. Erin understood now, the speech wasn't the finish line. It was just the signal that the real work had begun. Danielle, now retired from day-to-day operations, lived quietly near Lake Michigan. She tended a garden. Wrote letters. Answered only one phone, the one Erin called from. Every night, when the pressure overwhelmed her, Erin would text. Nobody greeted the brown-skinned woman in Chicago today. Another manager called equity a phase. I'm tired. Danielle would reply, always. They don't win unless you quit. One day, Erin received a letter from her old high school. They invited her back to speak at Career Day, staying true to purpose. She hesitated. But she went. In front of 200 students, she told her story, not about titles or headlines, but about the days she felt invisible, and the woman who saw through that. Down in the audience, a young black girl scribbled notes on her phone, eyes shining. Erin saw her. And remembered, not every victory makes the news. Some are hidden in the way a child dares to believe they belong. That night, she texted Danielle a photo of the girl. This is why we don't stop. But peace has a short shelf life. A private equity firm, Severance Capital, announced plans to buy majority control of Hayes and Wren. Their statement read, we aim to restore the prestige of the brand, refocus on shareholder value, and recalibrate the customer experience. Erin, read that line again. Recalibrate the customer experience. This wasn't a buyout. It was a rollback. She brought the board together. They listened politely. Offered smiles. But she saw it, the glint in their eyes. The seduction of a quick profit. The old desire to keep things comfortable. Danielle drove overnight from Michigan to New York. She didn't tell anyone. Just sat silently in the back of the boardroom the day of the vote. The room filled. A decision loomed. Erin stood, once more the only voice willing to burn. I won't promise soaring stock prices next quarter. I won't promise applause or articles. I will only ask, if a child like I once was walks into our showroom, dressed plainly, full of hope, will she be seen? Or will we tell her, with a smile, that she doesn't fit? I don't want this company to be marketable. I want it to be worthy. The vote began. 8 in favor of selling. 8 opposed. 1 abstention. 1 empty chair. Then a frail hand lifted. From the final seat. Vera Langston. A minor shareholder. 82 years old. Invested $5,000 in Hayes and Wren when it was still an idea. Her voice cracked as she said. I don't understand stocks. But I understand justice. I vote no. The sale collapsed. Erin didn't cheer. Danielle exhaled. Hand to chest. Smile soft. A whisper of joy that didn't need celebration. The next morning, Erin received an invitation. Keynote speaker, National Forum for Social Enterprise. A stage. A spotlight. A new fight. But her heart was somewhere else. That day, Danielle sent a message. Come home. I need to tell you something. Erin drove to Lake Michigan. Found Danielle on the porch, wrapped in a shawl. No words. Just the truth in her eyes. It's cancer, Danielle said softly. Pancreatic. Late stage. Erin didn't cry. Danielle reached for her hand. I've lived long enough to see the girl I believed in become the woman who believes in herself. That's more than I ever hoped for. She handed Erin a letter. 3 sentences. Handwritten. Ink bold. Never apologize for doing right. Never compromise because it's easier. And never believe you're not enough. 2 months later, Danielle Hayes passed quietly in her sleep. There was no press conference. No state funeral. Just a grave under the trees, near the lake. On the stone. She didn't just change a company. She taught us who we could be. 5 years later. The world didn't change with parades or fireworks. It changed with quiet choices. With people who decided to carry the flame instead of waiting for someone else to light it again. Project Ignition now operated in 47 states. Not because of billion-dollar deals. But because teachers in rural towns, tellers in local banks, and high schoolers in Oakland kept it alive, day by day. Some places used the framework well. Others twisted it. Some abandoned it. But in a few places, the flame caught. And stayed. One October afternoon, Erin Torres sat in her Brooklyn apartment, reading a handwritten letter from Phoenix, Arizona. Ms. Torres, I'm the daughter of a woman who once got turned away from your showroom just because she wore scrubs after a long shift as a nurse. This year, I got into UCLA Law, with an essay about Project Ignition. You don't know me. But I know you. Because my mom never forgot Danielle Hayes. And I'll never forget you. Erin folded the letter. Closed her eyes. All the storms. All the meetings. All the nights she wanted to quit. It was all worth it. For this. The next morning, Erin drove out to Lake Michigan. She walked alone to a quiet grove near the water's edge. A small plaque read. The Hayes Grove. On the stone. She didn't just change a company. She taught us who we could be. Erin laid her hand on the stone and whispered. I kept the fire, Danielle. Now it's time I pass it on. That Friday, she sent a message to her team. We'll have a leadership transition gathering this week. Dress comfortably. At the community center in Queens, where the first Project Ignition meeting had ever been held, Erin stood in a circle of 60 staff members. No big stage. No cameras. Just community. Then she nodded to someone in the back. Ari Mendoza stepped forward. 27 years old. Queer. Latinx. Former art teacher. Not a corporate type. Not a poster child for leadership. But someone who knew what it meant to be overlooked, and chose to stay visible anyway. Some people in the room murmured. Some were confused. Erin just smiled. I didn't choose someone who looks like me. I chose someone who will protect the fire. Ari stood, voice trembling, but clear. I don't promise to be perfect. I only promise not to pretend. And I promise to remember what this movement is about, especially when it gets inconvenient. In the crowd, a young Asian girl wiped her eyes. A middle-aged black hotel worker clasped his hands. A father of 3 stood taller, suddenly feeling seen. The flame had moved. Not ended. Transferred. That night, after everyone left, Erin stayed behind. She stood alone in the same room she had once entered as, just an assistant. She didn't cry. She smiled. Light. Like someone who had just passed a torch that would not go out. 5 years later. The light didn't explode. It stayed. Like breath in winter air. Like memory. Like love that doesn't demand attention, but never forgets its way home. Project Ignition had survived more than most thought it would. Not because it was invincible. But because it refused to become a product. It now lived in things no one tweeted about. In a small hotel chain that rewrote its onboarding guide based on Erin's training. In a bus driver who greeted every kid by name. In a mechanic who gave discounts to underpaid nurses because, you keep us running. Erin Torres was no longer its face. She was its foundation. She rarely gave interviews now. Didn't appear on panels. She declined a book deal. She chose something quieter. She chose presence. One spring morning, Ari, now director, invited her to a school visit in the Bronx. She almost said no. But she went. They entered a 6th grade classroom. A student asked, "What does leadership mean to you?" Erin said. "It's not being loud. It's listening to what everyone else is afraid to say, and saying it out loud." Afterward, a girl approached her. Shy. Skin the color of cinnamon. A homemade notebook in her arms. "I want to do what you do. But I get scared." Erin bent down and looked her in the eye. "Then start while you're scared. Because the fear doesn't mean stop. It means you're stepping into something real." That night, back home, Erin looked out her window. No headlines. No hashtags. Just a city pulsing with stories. Some hers. Most not. And that was enough. She took out a pen. On a blank sheet of paper, she wrote. "Legacy isn't what they say after you're gone. It's what still moves, long after you've let go." The paper stayed on her desk. She never published it. She didn't need to. Because the light wasn't hers to claim. It was theirs to carry. Change doesn't end with applause. Sometimes, it ends with betrayal. 8 months after Ari Mendoza was appointed director of Project Ignition, a leaked screenshot shook the foundation. Ari's new equity draft is going to alienate half our donors. Someone needs to rein him in. Private exec thread, confidential. Beneath the message, the logo of Verdra Capital, one of the key funders backing Ignition in 12 states. The backlash didn't roar. It crept. Quiet. Precise. Erin saw the screenshot at 4:42 a.m., over a cup of coffee in her dim kitchen. Rein him in. 3 days later. 13 people sat across from Ari in a polished boardroom. 3 familiar faces. 10 unfamiliar, unreadable. A voice said. We respect your ideals, Ari. But this is a movement, not a revolution. Ari, steady. Then maybe you've forgotten what ignition was built from. A woman from Verdra spoke softly but sharply. You're risking political blowback. School districts are freezing cooperation. Lawsuits are pending. Donors are nervous. Ari. What they're watching is whether we blink first. A man slid a document across the table. Reform containment strategy. Objective, maintain optics. Minimize ideological volatility. Ari looked up. You want equity to be polite. Safe. Digestible. But that's not equity. That's etiquette. Silence fell. But the real fight had just begun. The oversight hearing, Washington, D.C. Ari faced a row of officials, analysts, and one unreadable man in a charcoal suit. In your latest curriculum, you label certain case studies as institutionalized denial. Why teach that to 12-year-olds? One woman asked. Ari. Because they already live it. They see who gets pulled aside. Who gets ignored. I'm not planting ideas. I'm naming the ones they carry alone. The man in charcoal finally spoke. And when that naming turns to outrage? Protests. What then? What about the parents who say, my child came home ashamed of his skin? Ari. Shame doesn't come from truth. It comes from pretending truth doesn't matter. They called it a hearing. But it wasn't about hearing him. It was about softening the fire. Packaging it. That night, Ari received a message from Erin. You walked in alone. But we're still with you. Then another, anonymous. They're rewriting again. Ari didn't reply. He already knew. Because they weren't debating him anymore. They were replacing him. The quiet coup. Location, Project Ignition HQ, New York. Ari entered the building. No greetings. No nods. On the Ignition Legacy wall, a new frame had been mounted. Empty. In his inbox, a meeting invite titled Leadership Realignment Discussion. Inside, 3 executives, one unfamiliar consultant, and Omar, former CFO under Danielle, now back in control. Omar. This isn't personal. That's always what people say before cutting you loose. We're facing backlash. Losing contracts. We've drafted a transition. You'd become a senior advisor. Still visible. Still respected. Just, less central. Ari. But not empowered. No reply. You want me in the photo. But not in the room. A consultant smiled gently. It's evolution. Ari stood. No. It's a coup. If you want me gone, do it. But don't pretend this is for the movement. Looking at Omar. You taught Danielle numbers. She taught me to stand, even when surrounded. If this is your legacy, you've already lost it. He walked out. Calm. Clear. That night, he packed his desk. Took nothing but a photo of himself and Danielle on school steps. On the way out, he passed the wall again. He pulled out a pen. Under the empty frame, he wrote. It's not over. It was never about just one of us. A.M. 3 months later. Project Ignition continued. Polished. Polite. Acceptable. But something new began. A student-led coalition. Unfunded. Uninvited. Unapologetic. At the center, Celine. 17. Queer. Southeast Asian. Ari's former mentee. Her post. They kicked out the fire starter. But forgot, fire spreads. Erin saw the post at midnight. Smiled. It's begun again, she whispered. Because some lights dim. But the flame? It always finds another hand.